All right, why don't we go ahead and get started just to make sure that we get through everything on time. Uh, hey everybody, welcome to the June Terraform on Azure community call. If you haven't met us before, my name is Steven, and I'm here today with Mark Gray. And we together are product managers for Terraform on Azure. And our team manages the Azure deployment space, which includes any sort of infrastructure as code solution, such as Bicep and ARM templates. But Terraform, we're dedicated to it, and we have a mission to make sure that it is great. And I had a slide for that I forgot about, so I'm going to rehash that in a second. Anyways, before we keep going, code of conduct. This is just a, hey, please be nice. Don't be a jerk. I trust that everybody here can not only read this, but also be respectful and be considerate. So just a quick sanity check of everybody before we keep going. And for
Yeah, and
today,
we
oh, go ahead.
we do want to encourage you to speak up as well. This is a call that we want your input as much as we're going to be sharing with you. We want you to share with us. So um, uh, comply to the code of conduct, but feel free to speak out.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to unmute. Feel free to turn your camera on when you're talking, all those things. So I absolutely want you to be involved as well. All right. Thanks, Mark. For the agenda today, we have a few items here. As always, we're going to start with the overview, and then we're going to talk about a few updates for the AzAPI provider and Azure Export for Terraform. And then we have an open source project. And lastly, if you didn't see on the agenda, this week we're doing a little bit of something different with an open mic discussion. So during that time especially, we really will not be talking, so please unmute and participate. We want your opinions and thoughts during that time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the overview. So what is our team? I just talked about it earlier, but our whole goal is basically to make sure that Azure is the platform of choice for all IT DevOps and developers. And our real philosophy behind that is to make sure that we meet you where you're at. The way that I've often heard it said by my team is we like serving different ice cream flavors, and everybody can take their favorite and go ahead and enjoy it. And to us, Terraform is just another flavor in the ecosystem of cloud. And whatever flavor you choose, that you don't get punished for it, that you get a frictionless experience, that you feel like your experience is premium and it's really good. So with that being said, why did we start these community calls? And I know we talk about this every time, but we always want your feedback, and we want to get that through these times. We want to have you also contribute. So, hey, one of the ways that you can contribute is the next point in terms of having speakers at these talks. This time we're doing an open mic because of the um, just what we are aiming for, but we definitely want all of you to come in and speak regularly. So that's something that please sign up, and we will totally consider you and reach out to you if we think it will be a good fit. We're in the process of actually getting ready to reach out to some other people after this week. So keep your eyes peeled if you filled out that form. And then we want you to also know and be up to date with what we have coming down the pipeline. That includes our blog posts, that includes our Slack, that includes the Twitter. But this is just another way to deeper dive into some of the changes that we've made or give demos, all sorts of things like that. So, all right, I'm going to stop there. Anyone have any questions or comments? All right. If everything's good, I'll turn it over to Mark, and he's going to talk about his API.
Hey everyone. I'm gonna, like Stephen mentioned, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the updates on AzAPI. I'm not gonna talk about what the AzAPI provider is. If you have questions or want to understand what AzAPI provider is, let us know in chat or kind of unmute and let me know, and I will kind of give a quick overview of that. But hopefully everybody is at least aware of what it is now. And I will kind of continue on with what the new things are. So a quick update on that. All right, is it? I'm controlling the slides now, right, Stephen? Okay. So a couple of things to highlight from the AzAPI provider. It is getting a good amount of usage, so we appreciate all of you who have tried it. It's got over 4 million downloads so far, which is nowhere near the usage of Azure RM, but it's got a lot more usage than some of the similar providers from other clouds. So we're happy to see that it's helping customers, and we'd love to hear more about how it's helping and any features and functionality you would like to see as well. So if you have feedback on the AzAPI provider, please feel free to open issues on the GitHub repo. And we are keep an eye on that on a regular basis, and we'll prioritize based on, or one of the priorities that we will use is based on reactions to issues. So if you go on there and see issues that resonate with you, please do react to them to help us kind of prioritize those. So a couple of the things that I will kind of talk about and show that we have added to the AzAPI provider. So we have the resources that allow you to manage the full life cycle of a resource. We have resources that allow you to update resources. All of those apply to the control plane. So basically through ARM itself. And you may or may not know the distinction, but essentially the management plane, we allow you to manage those things. The data plane to date has not been manageable through the AzAPI provider, so I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But essentially, it is configuration for the service itself that you access through the service, and you don't access through the ARM plane. And examples of that are like if you want to create a key in Key Vault, or kind of create a query in a database or something like that. You're going directly to the service and then making changes to that. And that in a lot of scenarios is important to be able to manage those things. So we wanted to expose that in the AzAPI provider as well. And I'll show you a demo of that in just a minute and talk through a couple of things there. The other areas that we have, or features that we've added to the AzAPI provider, are adding the ability to turn off MSI and to CLI. So essentially, if you want to prevent the use of MSI or the CLI, we give you the ability to do that. And when you're managing the provider itself, you can actually turn that on or off. So kind of a nice add there. All right, so I will jump into my demo here real quickly. And this is just a quick overview here to give you an idea of what you can manage through the data plane. So what I have here is Azure Synapse workspace. It's already configured and out there. So if I do a Terraform plan, you'll see that since there's a data source, it's going to be up to date because there's not a whole lot to do. It's just going to get the information from the workspace. But at least you can see that somebody. Can you mute folks, Stephen? All right, so it goes and it gets the information from the workspace. Now, in that workspace, I want to set some data sets for that workspace. So they're basically connections between like blob storage or any number of things. And I think there are probably 20, 30, 40 different connections that you can make there. So if you want to do that, that happens at the data plane. So it means you actually talk to this instance of the Synapse workspace to actually make those changes. And previously, that is not exposed through ARM, so you are not able to do that. So if I uncomment all of this out, I'll talk through what we're doing here. So we've added the AzAPI data plane resource, and this resource allows you to manage things on the data plane. So just like the other resources, it's a generic resource that you can use to manage the data plane from an Azure perspective. We do provide the ability to add types, or not provide the ability. We require you to give the type of the resource here. This is not documented right now. So unlike the management plane, we don't have these documented yet. We're still working on this, but essentially it is the path that you would put from the REST call is you'd have uh, the provider, and then you have kind of the remainder of the path from the REST request there. If you have questions about that, definitely ask. But it's you should be able to figure it out from the REST request right now. Not ideal, but we are working on adding that documentation going forward. But you do put the type in there. You have access to the API like you do with the rest of the AzAPI resources. And then you provide the parent ID. And the parent ID is the path to that instance of the resource that you might want to manage. And in this particular case, you can get that from the data source. So you can get the endpoint from the data source that you want to manage, and you just concat the HTTPS in the beginning of that. And then that is the parent ID. Under the hood, we do the authentication. So as long as the account that you're using to run Terraform here has access to this endpoint, we will manage that for you and allow you to connect without providing credentials and all that stuff in this resource itself. From there, it's just typical Terraform, or at least with AzAPI provider. You have the body, and then you have the properties in that body. And I will go do a tf apply here. And I know this is bad practice, but from a demo perspective, I'm just going to go ahead and apply that. And this will go ahead and add this data set to the Synapse workspace. I will kind of show you that it's this is a full lifecycle resource. So it's not an update resource like the update resource in AzAPI. So once I apply that, if I make a change to this resource, and then do a plan or apply to that, you'll see that delta there, and you can make an update to that and do the typical Terraform configuration there. So this all does get saved in state. So once that gets applied, if I go look at my state here, this whole body is saved in state. So if I make a change to this body, you'll see that delta. And I will do that here as soon as this finishes applying, and it should be done in a second or two.
Hey, Mark, while that's applying,
Yeah,
we have a question from the crowd. Someone's asking,
cool.
parent ID is not a resource ID, right? It's a domain name from what I understand. Is it always the case? If not, how do we determine what is the parent ID value?
This will always be the endpoint that you're connecting to, because this is a data plane resource. You have to tell it where to connect to that instance. So it will always be a URL to connect to that instance. And where you would determine that is essentially going to the REST documentation for now, until we update the documentation in our docs to have the schema like we do for the management plane resources. You'll have to go to the REST documentation for that endpoint and get the information from that. All right, so if I come in here and say that I don't want to pass this parameter in here, I just want to hard code it. I can come in and get rid of the file name here. Say I want this to be a string that is my fancy file, and this is actually a string. And I can save that. And if I do a Terraform plan on that, I did save it, right? Yeah. You will see that it does the typical Terraform thing and checks state and says, I need to make a change. So it's going to tell me I need to delete this property and I need to change this property. So once that finishes, you will see that output there. And then I can go ahead and apply that. So yeah, so you can see here specifically that it needs to remove this property and wants to change these properties. So it gives you that full fidelity of what you have changed. And so you get that visibility. And then if I just do a Terraform apply, it will go ahead and apply that. So again, this is the full life cycle. So you get all the full fidelity that you're used to from Terraform with this. It's just accessing that data plane. One of the things that I want to point out with this data plane resource is we could have technically integrated this in with the other resources that we have in the AzAPI provider, but I wanted it to be, or we wanted it to be specifically separate because there are caveats to this usage. So one of those caveats that customers have run into quite a bit is if you, as an example, if you use the Azure M provider and you're managing storage account and you turn on a private link, and then you want to access blobs or files or things like that within that storage account, suddenly it breaks and you don't have a lot of visibility into why that has broken. With this specifically being a data plane, you are almost forced to know that I'm connecting to this thing through this URL. So if I turn on private link, it's going to block me from connecting that from wherever Terraform is running. So you get more visibility into that. So you have that distinction and stuff doesn't magically happen under the hood for you. So let us know. I don't love the data plane name here, but we couldn't think of anything better. So if you have any feedback on that or anything like that, definitely let us know as well. All right. So jumping back to the slides, can you bring those up, Stephen?
Yes, I can. We have another question in chat while I'm pulling that up.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that is a good question, and we can look at possibly changing that down the road. The reason we went with that was to be consistent with the other naming that we have for the other resources, and it's just the top level thing that you're referring to. So maybe it was not the perfect thing to do, but we just went that way from a consistency perspective.
And then just for anyone who hasn't read the chat, the
Yeah,
question was, is parent ID a good name if it's always returning or referring
yeah.
to a service endpoint domain? And
So the
then,
next question
yeah,
is,
go ahead.
are the data plane APIs documented somewhere? They are not yet. We are working on figuring that out. It's not exactly straightforward, so we're trying to figure that out, and we'll update the documentation that is or the schema documentation for the management plane resources. We will augment the data plane stuff there when we can do that programmatically. Currently, the way to do that is to go to REST and look at the documentation on the REST request for that call. All right. So before moving on, I do want to give you some insights into kind of what's next from a AzAPI perspective as well. And kind of the next thing that we are looking into is being able to manage the MS Graph endpoints as well, which is the kind of the next big thing, which would give you the ability not only to manage the things that are exposed in the control plane and the data plane, but also in MS Graph, so you can manage Azure AD and groups and users and all of that kind of stuff too. So we're looking into that as well. All right. Um, um, so Alex asked if there are any limitations to any data plane APIs that would not work out of the box. The only limitation that I'm aware of is the data plane API needs to support the same authentication that the control plane does. So as long as it supports that authentication, then the data plane API should work fine. If it requires some unique authentication, then it's not going to work. Um, so, all right. So the last bit I have there is our survey for the AZ API provider is still live. We want your feedback. We've heard feedback from customers that they love the AzAPI provider. We've heard feedback from customers that say they are not going to use the AzAPI provider. Whichever camp you're in, we want to hear your feedback so that we can make it better and help you be successful doing what you need to do from a Terraform and Azure perspective. So please take a look at the survey, provide your feedback, and help us improve. And with that, I will hand it back to Stephen, I think.
All right, thanks, Mark. Um, so we're going to talk about Azure Export for Terraform. Some of you might have heard this name as Azure Terrify. I think sooner or later I'm not going to keep mentioning Azure Terrify as a name. If you haven't heard of the tool, please stop me because I'm probably going to skip this slide just because I think at this point I've covered it enough in the community calls. So um, the main things I wanted to focus on were some of the updates. So first of all, there's a new video released, which basically covers your end-to-end scenarios, basic ones, albeit involving Azure Export for Terraform. Make sure to give that a watch. We put that uh, some good amount of work into that to make sure that it could very succinctly try to explain to you everything. And secondly, the documentation for Azure Export for Terraform has been published. There's, I believe, 5 articles, and those 5 articles cover different points on how you can use the tool or what sort of scenarios you should use the tool or best practices, limitations, resource filtering, all sorts of stuff. We're trying to update that with some of our new versions coming soon, but we will try to keep that up to date. So make sure to reference that whenever you need to learn about the tool itself. And then we're on 0.12 now. The biggest change I would say since 0.12 is that, or with 0.12 is that we now support other environments such as government or China Cloud or anything like that. We have been seeing, to be fully transparent, some issues open about some bugs related to it, though. So please file an issue or just react to one of the existing ones if you try that and it doesn't work. Our engineers are in the middle of trying to fix that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about today that I think is a question I've been getting a lot about is about Terraform 1.5. So if you're not aware, Terraform 1.5 brings support for functionality known as import blocks. So a lot of the question that I've been hearing, whether it's through Twitter or even through conversation, is, hey, this import block functionality came out, so what do I need Azure Export for? Is there even a point to using it? Because Terraform import blocks are this built into Terraform functionality that basically does the same thing. And I wanted to kind of show not tell on the disparities there. We do have a pinned issue, but rather than just talking about go read the link on that GitHub issue, I thought it would be more useful to demo this for everybody. And because I'm running on a dev experience, it's I already pre-ran everything, to be fully honest with everybody, just because this is not officially released functionality, but basically we have a PR merged into the Azure Expo for Terraform GitHub that supports the ability to use these import blocks. So before I talk about the functionality, there's a couple things that I want to cover in terms of the difference between the two. So the import block, as you can see, on the simplest level, what it does is it will take an ID of a resource and it can map it to a resource type with a resource name. And that's really powerful, and you can generate tons of configurations. But the main caveat that currently exists is that there is no way to know exactly what resources you need to import if you're not aware of where they exist. So what I mean by that is just because you know you need to import a resource group doesn't mean that you would know what resources reside in that resource group unless you open up the portal, pull up that resource group, click down into every single resource and every single associated resource, and then import all of those manually after typing out the import block. With Azure Export for Terraform, a single command of AZTF export RG resource group name is not only going to get me the resource group, but also all the resources contained within, which is exactly what's going on here. So if you're on Terraform 1.5, starting in our next major release, which is 0.13, we're going to have this functionality available. And what it will basically be able to do is you'll be able to use the generate command, and you'll be able to generate this in addition to the mapping file, for those of you who are familiar with the mapping file. So the mapping file and this will both get generated, and then you can just run the Terraform plan generate config command. And then for me, I targeted this generated.tf file. So we can see right here, this generated.tf is pretty much just filling all the right things that it should. And for comparison, if you're curious, we also ran HCL only on a different folder, but basically on the exact same target of resources. So if you look at the generated configs between the two, there's honestly not a big difference. And this part is because I think for the most part, there's a basically these default properties will sometimes be, it'll be easier to explain if I find the corresponding. So here's network interface right here. So what'll happen is that network interface has these default properties exposed through the generated config. Azure Export has some logic to basically not show those. And then it will also, you can see, expose some of the IP configuration properties that Azure Export doesn't expose. So there's some minor disparities. The biggest thing that consistently is there is there's explicit dependencies with every single resource within Azure Export, whereas there isn't for the generated config. But full transparency, we are really interested and deeply partnered with the HashiCorp teams, and that includes the team that works on the import blocks. So they talked to us before this went public, and we were aware of the functionality, and we even exchanged feedback, and we plan to continue to collaborate moving forward. So the hope is that we can create a great experience in terms of resource discovery, and you would be able to, with a tool like Azure Export for Terraform, find all your resources in a resource group, or filter your resources at a subscription level down to all your compute or VM experiences. And the integration would then be able to be tied into this import block experience and make that more seamless over time. So keep your eyes peeled. It's a long answer, but if I can pull up my slides, what I think the shortest way to summarize it is that Azure Export for Terraform is going to require you to install a different tool. If you already have Golang, Go install is a very convenient way to do it. But the unfortunate thing is that you're going to have to install it. But in exchange, it offers not just resource discovery, but it offers resource filtering. The import block can immediately be installed with Terraform 1.5. And the other thing is when you run Terraform plan generate config, it will immediately try to validate that config. And that's a powerful thing that you would have to run Terraform plan on your Azure Export tool. And then it doesn't support resource discovery right now. You're kind of on your own to figure out where your resource lives. And right now, Azure Export for Terraform 0.13 is, right, like I said, this is merged PR. So if you want to download a dev version, you can play around with this functionality. But when it's released, you'll have the best of both worlds. So that would be my short-ish answer on exactly the difference between the two. Any questions on that? I'm looking at chat right now. So Justin's asking if there's a timeline for building this into a console experience. We've heard a lot of good feedback on that. We want to, and we're in the process of seeing how we can make that happen. And I know Mark responded to that, but yeah, we're trying to make it happen. And then any other questions?
Yeah, should I briefly comment on my scenario? Or is that something to take offline at another time?
Carl, we'll reach out to you. I definitely do want to talk to you, just to echo what Mark said, and hear about your scenario and how we could help you use it.
Great.
Thank you. All right. If there are no more questions, we will talk about the open source projects.
Hey everyone. So I'm gonna go over an open source project that I found pretty interesting. So I thought I would share it with you all here real quickly. I will do a super quick demo, but it is a tool that we don't have any affiliation with. It's just one that I came across and thought would be interesting to share with you all. But it solves, or it helps with the problem where you need to manipulate state, but you have GitOps or DevOps pipelines and things like that. And kind of managing that state outside of that pipeline is kind of a pain, and you don't have any history of it and all of that. So this tool gives you a way to actually manage your state. So if you want to move things in state or rename things or anything like that, it gives you the ability to actually do that in a declarative way, and kind of have a history of that, and you can do it in pipelines and all that kind of stuff. So pretty neat little tool. I think it's early in its development, but it has some potential, and I thought we would share it with you. So I will do a really quick demo here to kind of show you how it works. And then hopefully if you're interested in it, you can jump to their site here and kind of play around with it. So I will jump into my demo here real quick. All right. So in this scenario, I have a container app that I'm managing here. And if I go to, oops, I did not want to do that, but oh well. If I go to my directory here and do a tf plan here, you'll see that everything has been configured and there's nothing I need to do to change it. It is in the right state, but if I come and for some reason want to reconfigure my configuration, and I want to change the environment or the workspace here, log analytics workspace to log analytics workspace 2. So I want to change the name of this thing. I can change that reference in here as well. But if I do that and I run plan here, so if I do a save on that and do a tf plan, everyone knows what's going to happen. It's going to say I need to destroy everything and recreate it, and that's not what I want to do in any way, shape, or form. So in order to kind of work around that, I would typically need to go mess around with state, or you do need to mess around with state to actually fix it so that it actually doesn't need to do anything, and you just change the references to those names. The way that you do that using this tool, so it says I need to deploy and add 3 things. I can come in here and I can define what I want to do. So you tell it where your configuration is. In my particular case, I have this configured to use TF Cloud or Terraform Cloud. So it tells what the workspace is for that, and then you give it the actions that you want to perform. So I want to rename my log analytics from this name to this too. And then I can do a tf migrate plan and give it the name HCL here, and it will go I need to change it. Okay. All right, so I guess my demo is going to completely fail on me, but anyway, so the way that this would work is you do a TF plan, and what it does is it goes and attempts to do the migration. So in a temporary file, it does creates the state locally, and then does the TF plan against that state, and then if the plan succeeds, then if the Terraform plan succeeds, then the TF migrate plan succeeds, and then you can go do a Terraform migrate, and it'll actually migrate the state in Terraform Cloud, so it'll actually make those changes. You can do a number of different actions here. You can do a move, so like this particular case, I can move this resource to this resource. It gives you the ability to do, and you can do multiple of these. You can see that this is an array, so you can come in here and do another thing. So they have another command that's X move, which gives you the ability to do a move, but with like what is it called? You can match by multiple things. You can do multiple matches. You can do a rename, and you can do an import as well. So RN, and you can do an import as well. So it gives you the ability to do a bunch of different things. So although this demo completely failed, and I apologize for that, I encourage you to go take a look at it. It seems like it is an interesting project and might be helpful for kind of those scenarios where you want to make changes to your state, but you don't want to do it, or you want to do it in a DevOps and a Git friendly way. This gives you the ability to actually check this code in and kind of see that change through your pipelines. So, all right. I will jump back to the slides now, and again, apologize for the failed demo, but go check it out.
There's a couple questions as well about the tool, Mark, when you get a chance. So the first,
you go ahead. You could do a
I was
move the
gonna
other way around quickly.
Yeah, basically the question is, can you do a move back? Like if you make that change, can you just reverse it?
Yes, you can. That's what I had actually done. I think the problem that my demo ran into was I started tracking the history, and for some reason with the history, it prevents you from making a change or something like that. But I actually did that when I was playing around with this demo. I changed it to this too, and then I changed it back to this. So I was actually able to change it forward and back there. So yes, you can change it both ways.
The other question from Severio is, how is this different from what Terraform supports in the refactoring docs? And sorry if I butchered that name completely. So it seems like he's linking to something in the developer. Yeah. Maybe we can save that for chat, just because I think it'll take a minute to look at.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that offline.
Sure. Okay. All right. So last thing that we're gonna do today is open mic. So like I said before, we're trying this out for the first time, but we want to specifically talk about the hottest topic on the block, if you will, which is ChatGPT and AI. We've heard a lot of different feedback and a lot of different thoughts tossed around both internally and externally. So we want to get a feel for the crowd of Terraform users, and hey, what better way to do that than to talk to our community, right? So we're going to try this out. We're going to see how it goes, and hopefully this is valuable and a good experience for everybody involved. So, all right. I have a set of questions here, but I'm by no means married to them. I just want to start a conversation with everybody here around ChatGPT, OpenAI, using it for Terraform on Azure. Have you used it? Do you continue to use it? If you haven't, or if you tried it and didn't like it, why not? How would you like to use it? It's an open mic, right? So feel free to just come off mute to talk and share about your thoughts in regards to this. And the last piece I think is one that I would like to steer people towards, which is, what is the most important feature that you think it could provide you? All right, Severio, I see you raise your hand. Go ahead. And am I saying it right?
Hello everybody. I'm using some AI in my Terraform work. I have to admit I don't really use ChatGPT, but I use GitHub Copilot, and that's pretty handy to code faster. Um, I used once ChatGPT. It's very powerful if you want to write some preconditions in Terraform. So you would give like some Terraform code and then explain in plain English, can you implement for me these preconditions? I want this to happen, and then it will write like even complex logic pretty quickly. So I found that useful. I had also bad experience like trying to describe in English some Azure infrastructure, and ChatGPT would propose some Terraform that looks correct, but it just put in the resources some options that don't really exist, or the names are wrong, so it's not really accurate. So to summarize, when it's generative, so it has to generate code, it doesn't really work. But if you have to do some inference, like just do the precondition, then that works a little bit better because it's less complex. It doesn't have to come up with which resources to use. So if you set a little bit the boundaries, it can be useful. Thank you.
Sweet. Next up, I think we have Mark, and totally feel free to talk about your Copilot experience as well. I think that's still very much AI related.
Yeah, I have not used Copilot, but I know some colleagues here at Microsoft that use it and they like it. But yeah, I think generating Terraform, like using the providers, is not going to be so great with ChatGPT, because what I've noticed is it uses provider versions from like long ago, and so that code probably won't even work, today, if there's breaking changes in the provider. So that's one thing that I've noticed. What I use it for, full disclosure, I suck at Bash. So oftentimes like I have to go drop into Bash. By the way, can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I use it to figure out Bash, and I have used it to like experiment with different like object construction within locals, or to figure out like for expressions, just because like the different curly bracket or square bracket that you use within within for expressions, you know, can be a little bit, you know, crazy trying to unwind all that yarn. But that's what I use ChatGPT for, on Terraform mostly. But it's been hugely helpful for Bash for me. So.
You can go ahead, William. Thanks for raising your hand. And what? Sorry, right before you go, I was gonna say there are polls in the chat right now, so please feel free to vote in those chats if you don't want to come off mute and share. We do value your opinion even through that. So go ahead, William.
Yeah, I've been using ChatGPT to build modularized dry type Terraform code. What has been successful for me is telling it examples, giving it copy and paste excerpts of the documentation, and then once I, because sometimes I have to tweak the key names or some of the values, and once I've tweaked it, I actually respond with, this is the correct configuration for the previous request. And so I've got it down to where I can type resource space and then a resource type, and it builds my code the exact way that I want it to be built. Again, I'm doing modular code that's as dry as possible so that I can push mapped objects into the module, and it defines all of the code. I'm also using in my variables the optional clauses so that I can send over nulls for any type of values that are optional for that type of a resource.
All right, having some good conversation so far. Philip. Philip, you're muted right now if you are trying to talk.
I was saying I pressed the raise hand button by accident.
No worries.
Apologies.
All right. Let me ask one question for the audience then, that last one. What would be the most important feature that you think would be providable from ChatGPT or Copilot? And you could also say an improvement to a feature, like higher accuracy. That's another thing that can be important. So go ahead. Is that I don't want to mispronounce it. Is it Stefan? Yes.
Yeah, it's Stefan. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Stefan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I try to play with is going from Azure RM to AzAPI, switching in either direction. So that would probably be something that I would use ChatGPT for. So maybe taking an example of I find online or something that is generated somewhere and being able to translate it and maybe bring it to my reality. In some project, they will be using maybe AzAPI, other Azure RM. So being able to kind of translate that back and forth, that would be very useful. And for sure, the accuracy. Right now, I'm still learning Terraform. So what it suggests It's been suggested to me using an AI. I mostly used Copilot, but I assume ChatGPT is a little bit aligned with this. And but yeah, so it looks good, but when I'm trying to apply that, it's where it fails. So I need to dig it. But if I'm able to speak with the AI, with not only Copilot, but let's say Copilot chat, and I assume ChatGPT is the same thing, I'm able to kind of figure it out. But yeah, accuracy would be something that would need to be improved also.
All right, Mark, you're up.
One thing I was thinking about was I get every once in a while I get these really ridiculous import, where like there's a resource that's already created and there's like dozens of them, hundreds of them, and it's not really difficult for a human to go look at the like scramble output from Terraform, like when it like pukes at you, because it gives you like the nice the resource like ID path, and it gives and like within Azure, and then it gives you the nice object path within Terraform. So it's not a difficult problem for humans to solve, but like it would be really cool. I haven't tried this yet, but I intend to. If you could take like the Terraform output and in a programmatic way, just prompt ChatGPT to be like, hey, ChatGPT, I'm going to give you some Terraform output, and I want you to parse all these import failures, right? Where there's an existing resource that needs to be imported. And I want you to generate me a Terraform import script, right? That would be like a huge time saver and it might even be possible with a traditional prompt, but I think I just got access to the OpenAI like service, and I was thinking about as like one of my prompt techniques is to like figure out how to programmatically do that, so I can just spit out the output, generate the Terraform import script. But things like that, I feel like there's a lot of things in the Terraform output where it's like it's air scrambling, that maybe ChatGPT could help us better react to, just by doing like basic text processing that a human would have to do. That's my one thing besides having more up-to-date provider support. But
All right, Severio.
Yeah, I had a couple ideas on how AI could help this specific community. The first one is around the GitHub issues that we have on the Terraform provider and on the various Azure verified Terraform modules. As I said, I find AI tools are very, very effective at detection. So we could have like a first triage of the feedback that comes in. So the AI could detect if it's a duplicated issue, could detect if the user is asking about something like a feature in a module, but the Azure feature is still in preview. So it can already give a lot of information like super quickly. For bugs, it could check the issue and check if the person that opened the bug also provided the necessary steps to reproduce. These like AI models can detect very quickly, and so we would go faster because we don't need like the interaction with the engineer that arrives a few hours later just to discover that the reproduction steps are missing. So the AI could ask this like much quicker. And this is my first idea. Then the second idea would be it would be super nice to have a chatbot that has context on all the open GitHub issues on Terraform Azure. So chatting with this chatbot, but not with the knowledge that is frozen at the model, but either with fine tuning or with augmented retrieval. So like embedding all the GitHub issues and having them in a hot embeddings database so that the chatbot can uh, make a prompt and put the human input and put also some context that comes from the open GitHub issues, so that instead of doing the manual search on GitHub through the issues to understand if somebody is having your same problem, the AI can speed up this process like dramatically. So I see these are like very high impact contributions that could speed up this community. I don't really believe already we can have like AI generating Terraform code for us. This I think will come maybe at a later stage, but today this would be my suggestions for using the best out of these tools. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Mark, I see you're back. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like the previous. What was your name?
Hello, I'm Saverio. Nice to meet you.
Valerio, nice to meet you. I like your idea about the chatbot. I was even thinking this isn't really Terraform related; it's more Azure related. But wouldn't it be nice if we had a chatbot that you could just add that was spelunking the Azure ARM like object resource graph, right? And you could just ask it in general. Maybe this is coming out of, but you could just ask it general questions about your Azure environment, and like where do I have untagged resources, or what VMs are hitting policy flag or something like that. Just and general like interaction with your Azure environment seems like a really fun thing. But again, that's not super Terraform related, but it was something I was kicking around.
All right. So it is 10 a.m. Anybody have any other thoughts before we wrap up the open mic? Maybe time for one or two more. I do see one in the chat about taking the state file to help possibly diagnose any sort of failures, and taking that input. It's an interesting idea. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your opinions. Appreciated this. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it, and definitely feel free to give me your feedback in regards to the open mic session itself. Thank you all for attending this call. Our next call is going to be in August, so keep a lookout on that. And definitely make sure to join the community if you haven't yet. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube, follow us on Twitter. We have a Slack now. I don't have the link here right now, but really appreciate everybody here giving their time today. And hopefully you feel like you have a little bit more equipment to use Terraform on Azure. So thank you all.